Hi there, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Wednesday, July 3rd, 2024. Phil Giraldi joins us now for his regular weekly session with us. Phil, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. You have a very interesting piece. You and I have been talking about the influence of the Israeli lobby for a long time, but you have a very, very interesting, detailed, well-documented piece at the UN's review dated June 28th, which is just last week, about the nature and extent of how cash dominates and perverts American politics. If foreign agents of any country but Israel attempted to influence American legislation and American elections the way Israel does, would there not be at least an uproar and at worst a series of prosecutions?
Yeah, there would be both. And I would point to the example of the reaction to Russia when it was implied or stated by the Hillary Clinton campaign and others that Russia had been interfering in elections and had been involved with propaganda and all this sort of thing. Russia, these organizations were sanctioned. People were individually sanctioned and warned that if they ever came under U.S. jurisdiction, they would be prosecuted. And this went on without much of a fuss. And essentially, Russian media, like Russia Today, have been excluded from the U.S. market. Those viewpoints have basically disappeared. And but Israel, it's a whole different story. Whatever Israel does, protective mechanisms immediately go up to make sure that Israel is not angered by them or inconvenienced by them. And this is all due to a lot of factors like money. There's legislation being discussed in Congress this very afternoon about the casualties in Gaza. The United States government, if this resolution goes through, will be unwilling to even say that 37,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed, because these numbers come from the bad guys. It's this kind of thinking. Israel gets away with everything, and nobody else does.
I disagreed with almost everything that John McCain said, though we were personal friends because he was at Fox so much when I was there. But he did warn throughout his entire career about even though he was friends with AIPAC, about the influence of money in politics. I mean, this is a profound issue. Sheldon Adelson, the casino magnate, as you point out, gave Trump $100 million to his campaign, not in his pocket, in 2020. And now Sheldon has passed away, and Mrs. Adelson, it is reported, is giving him another $100 million in return for a promise to make the West Bank part of Israel. Now, the West Bank under the Oslo Accords is an independent country. And yet, according to today's Wall Street Journal, it's the piece that came out just an hour ago, so it's not in the print Wall Street Journal yet. It'll be in tomorrow's. The Israelis have seized more land from the West Bank in the 6 months of 2024 than all the time put together between 1993 and 2024. And the American government looks the other way, or in some cases even applauds it, as we will see on July 24, when the genocidal war criminal stands where Lincoln once stood, in the well of the House of Representatives to address a joint session of Congress.
Yeah, this is precisely what's going on. I believe it was just yesterday that the Israeli government approved the something like 6,000 more housing units on the West Bank. Now, these are all illegal. And it was one of Donald Trump's gifts to us. His ambassador, Friedman, declared that no, he didn't see really any problem with the Israeli settlements. Obviously he's a lawyer, but he can't see criminal behavior when it's right in front of him. So this has been going on, and it's all illegal. And one of the interesting aspects of it, a lot of this illegal activity is funded by U.S. Foundations. The Kushner Family Foundation, for example, has been funding illegal settlements on the West Bank. And this is aided and abetted by our own legislation. These organizations that are strongly supporting Israel in all its manifestations are protected to a certain extent and helped by what we call 501c3, which is a special dispensation whereby they can raise money, and the donors are allowed to take the money that they don't donate off their taxes. So it's a double incentive to be getting money, and this money winds up in settlements, and it winds up, as I've been discovering, to support the Israeli army.
So if Kushner, the Kushner family and their friends give $500,000 or $500 million to these entities in Israel, they can deduct from their income tax returns that. So it's tax-free. It's tax-free dollars that is going to steal land.
Right.
To commit a crime, to commit an international crime. It's actually even a crime under Israeli law, but then nobody's going to prosecute them because the government's in cahoots with these people.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this money is not regarded as income. It's regarded as just money, and it's not taxed by the U.S. government, by the IRS or the Treasury Department, and whoever the donors are, they get a double deal because they get to take the donations off of their tax. So this is how the system works, and the Israelis are masters at working this and benefiting from it, probably because they have a strong hand in the Department of Treasury.
Is the intelligence community as co-opted by Israeli cash as the political community is?
Not to my knowledge. That's because the intelligence community operates in a different way, how it's funded, and so on and so forth. There certainly have been certain American intelligence officers who have been corrupted by money in various ways, but they tend to be the exception rather than the rule.
Right, I'm not talking about Rick Ames or somebody like that. I'm talking about it. Do the Israelis spread cash in the form of Mossad buying things for people, not a Mercedes, but something they would need to do their work? Is Israeli cash a corrupting feature of Intel, CIA, or MI6?
I would have to say it is, but we would have to be very careful about defining where it has its impact.
Okay.
I think in many ways the Epstein case in New York still has not resolved that issue of what the involvement of Mossad and possibly even some domestic intelligence agency was in essentially entrapping people or picking up people of influence who would attend these soirees, that kind of thing. That would be more what I would see coming out of the way the system works.
Does the Mossad co-opt Americans? I mean, for example, is it conceivable that Jeffrey Epstein himself was an asset of the Mossad?
I absolutely believe he was. And, I think that all the evidence was that also Ghislaine, through her father, Robert Maxwell, who was a leading asset of Israeli intelligence, the connections are all there. And somebody was funding Epstein apart from some publisher out in Ohio. So this I think is a presumption that could be made and should be made and should be investigated. I sure would like to see all those Epstein papers released, the investigation.
Right, right. How would they co-opt somebody like Epstein or Maxwell, both of whom were fabulously rich? I mean, do these people work with Mossad because they believe in Zionism, or do they work with Mossad because deposits are made in a Swiss bank account?
It's probably a bit of both. And personal connections should never be dismissed in terms of how intelligence operations work. And and they might have done it for the thrill of it. This is this I certainly know from my own time in the agency that there were certainly plenty of officers that got a thrill out of the dark room and corrupting someone, or in a bar in Afghanistan or something. I mean, there was certainly that thrill to it.
Is Mossad present on Capitol Hill as we speak?
I would imagine Mossad is heavily present on Capitol Hill, but working through proxies, and that's where the revelation that we just recently had about there being a spy from APAC in every office. APAC works with Mossad. There should be no doubt about that. And the interesting fact, of course, is that they've never been really investigated by the U.S. government, in spite of the fact that a lot of what they do is quite clearly illegal. But that's the way the system benefits Israel.
Lieutenant Colonel Kwiatkowski told us of an incident where Israelis, two in uniform, two in civilian clothes, had landed at Dulles in a private jet and came right into the Pentagon. No checking for passports, no record of who they were, no security check, no magnetometer check. Does any other government get treated that way by ours?
Maybe the British. That would be the only ones I would suspect, based on the extremely long-term friendly relationship and cooperation around the world on intelligence issues. But no, the Israelis have a special status that particularly began to develop with George W. Bush and with the crowd of people he had in the Pentagon. They used to walk right in. I know Karen. I know Karen, and she has told me that story too, and I find it astonishing. They apparently are not subject to the same building controls or anything else as anyone else is.
Well, she even mentioned the person they were going to see, Douglas Feith. Correct me if I'm wrong, Phil. Chief of Staff or head of National Security for Dick Cheney.
Well, Douglas Feith was head of the Office of Special Plans.
Oh, even higher. So he was like right underneath Rumsfeld.
Yeah, he was right under Rumsfeld, and as far as I know, I don't know what his relationship with Cheney might have been, but he certainly would have had a relationship.
Right.
And he was the one that produced Feith in his office were the ones who produced all the phony intelligence that was used to suggest that Saddam Hussein was a threat to the United States. Right. He was famous for that.
How unstable is the Netanyahu government today? I mean, about an hour before we began this broadcast, the New York Times reported that IDF leaders, senior generals, have said, we want the war over. We can't beat these people. We don't care if the hostages come home. We want to stop fighting. This is consistent with what McGregor and Ritter have said, that the IDF is exhausted. We also are getting reports that 7,000 IDF soldiers are dead. Now, the Israelis are never going to admit that, but that's a lot in this basically civilian army.
Yeah, there have been some interesting comments coming out of the generals in Israel, comments like to the effect of what you just said. And one of the fears that they are expressing is that they are in no condition to take on Hezbollah. And that is one of their big concerns. They're even saying that they're low on munitions and they're low on personnel. They don't have as many reserve soldiers at the present time as they would need to fight another major action. So that's what's to a certain extent motivating them. But I'm not quite prepared to see a palace coup take place with Netanyahu being removed by the generals. But boy, that would be interesting.
Even though you're my friend and I love you, I'm going to raise your blood pressure. Here's Netanyahu at his most arrogant. This is just 3 days ago or 5 days ago. Cut number 5, Sonia.
And Iran is fighting us on a 7-front war. Obviously, Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis, the militias in Iraq and Syria, Judea, Samaria, West Bank, Iran itself. They'd like to topple Jordan, and their goal is to have a combined ground offensive from various fronts, coupled with a combined missile bombardment. We have to, we've been given the opportunity to scuttle it, and we will. The first requirement is to cut that hand, Hamas. People who do this thing to us are not going to be there. And we'll have a long battle. I don't think it's that long, but we'll get rid of them. We also have to deter the other elements of the Iran terror axis. But we have to deal with the axis. The axis doesn't threaten only us. It threatens you. It's on the march to conquer the Middle East. Conquer the Middle East. Conquer. That means actually conquer. Conquer Saudi Arabia, conquer the Arabian Peninsula. It's just a question of time. And what's standing in their way is the small Satan, that's us, on the road to the middle-sized Satans, that's the Europeans. They're always offended when I tell them that. You're the great Satan, not them. Okay, and we have to stop them.
I don't know who was in that audience. There must have been Americans there because there was an American flag over his right shoulder. McGregor and
it was Hawkstein. It was Hawkstein and his people.
Probably. And for those who don't know who Hawkstein is, that's Amos Hawkin, who was born in Israel, is an Israeli citizen, fought in the IDF, came to the U.S., got American citizenship, and is now a high-ranking official in the Joe Biden, Tony Blinken State Department, and is actually in charge of the negotiations in the Middle East. Somebody with dual citizenship and a history in the IDF. McGregor and Ritter both say there is zero evidence that Iran wants to conquer Saudi Arabia, that Bibi just doesn't know what he's talking about.
Right.
And this, of course, in fairness to Netanyahu, was made before the generals made their comments of today that they don't want to fight anymore. Question: do you think the IDF is exhausted and doesn't want to fight anymore, no matter what Netanyahu says?
I think to a certain extent they're playing the victim card, and they're making it look like all the bullies are lined up against them, whereas in fact a lot of this situation was developed by Netanyahu and his reactions and his policies. So it's it's kind of pushing the checker over the other side of the board, and he tries to make the U.S. appear to be a victim too. That they're going to come after you next. Well, that would be quite a trick, and he's a liar. He does nothing but lie. He's basically propping up his own position, and that's all he's attempting to do. And the whole business about these enemies lined up is basically to bring the United States into the fighting, and to do the heavy fighting, and that's really what he wants. And bear in mind also, the thing that kind of scares me is let's not forget that Israel has nuclear weapons, and Israel has more than once indicated that the Samson option, which would be to bring everybody else down with them, including the U.S., is something that's in the back of their heads.
Including the U.S. Israel wouldn't exist without the U.S.
Yeah, it would be an interesting proposition. But it's if you go back and look at Seymour Hersh's initial reporting on the Samson option, you'll see that the idea was to take down a number of cities around the world that didn't help Israel enough to survive, was the argument. And they included Rome, they included London, they included Paris, and Washington was also on the list.
Wow. Doesn't Netanyahu know that the IDF can't defeat Hamas? All he has to do is listen to his own generals. And doesn't he know that they certainly can't defeat Hezbollah?
Does he know it, or does he want to say it? Maybe
you can answer both ways, Phil.
Yeah. Look, he's got to know it. If his generals are saying this, that means when they have these war cabinet meetings, they're telling him this. And if he's not going to listen to his generals, who are seeing the intelligence on a minute-by-minute basis all day long, which he is not doing, then he's making a deliberate political decision not to acknowledge it, which is scary, because that means that there's a lot of other stuff he's probably not acknowledging that could turn out very badly for us and for everyone else who's involved in this.
What kind of military aid do you think he's expecting if they engage in a full-fledged war with Hezbollah?
He would be expecting the United States to intervene directly, and he'd be making the same pleas that, we don't have enough weapons, we don't have enough troops, and that are being hinted at by his generals. And the point is that he wants the United States to do the fighting, because the capabilities of Hezbollah, which are considerable, are pretty clear.
What would the United States aid consist of? Air Force and Navy? We're not going to put troops on the ground in Lebanon again, are we?
I hope not. There was a bad result last time. So I would think that he'd be thinking in terms of air support, naval support to a certain extent, since they're dealing with a coastline yet again. That kind of thing. I wouldn't see boots on the ground, as it were, extensively, but there certainly would be some intelligence personnel, and there would be some advisors and that kind of thing.
Phil Giraldi, a pleasure, my dear friend, no matter what we talk about. Thank you for your insight and for your courage, as always. A happy 4th of July to you. We're certainly independent of Great Britain. They're not independent of us, by the way, because they're under our thumb, but we are not independent of the federal government. That's a mess.
Well, happy 4th of July to you and to your staff and to all our listeners. We love you.
Thank you. Love you too. All the best. Coming up at 4 o'clock today, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, and at 5 o'clock, Max Blumenthal, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.